passe à super, l'artiste, super, encore un but sensationnel. That's a brilliant bit of follow-up play by Mahe. Oh my goodness me, what a shot.
Sagosen setter det hen! Han setter den! De i semifinale igjen!
Well, we took a month off after the Euro. we didn't record in February, but here we are, and what a fucking time to start recording again. Well, Alex, you left your equipment for a month untouched, and now it can't record, so you're on Zoom today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. It was a bit of a surprise that my recorder wasn't working, but yeah, that's what I get for not touching it and not providing beautiful content for our fans for a whole month.
Well, here to provide the beautiful content today, Brian Campion. How are you?
Hello, everybody. Yes, geez, you really hung out Alex to dry there. First comment, Chris.
I know.
There's no holding back now.
There's a lot of handball to talk about, but let's start with the handball news that came out last night as we're recording on a Tuesday afternoon, and the IHF Executive Committee's decision, which was, as they stated on Eurohandball.com, with a view on the war situation in Ukraine and with reference to the recent recommendations of the International Olympic Committee, the Executive Committee of the European Handball Federation convened on Monday for an extraordinary meeting. And from that, the national teams of Russia and Belarus, as well as Russian and Belarusian clubs competing in European handball competitions, are suspended. This holds true until further notice and relates to all current competitions. A straightforward decision in the end to make, also when the IOC are leading the way with it.
That's the way it has gone. So going through the timeline of events, I suppose the first announcement was the Nord Stream 2 announcement, which has been a key partner for the IHF Champions League since 2018-19. A decision was taken on the 25th of February relating to the Nord Stream 2 presence on LED boards, floor stickers, cube spots on team sleeve badges during the IHF Champions League matches. So the decision was made in close coordination and cooperation with Nord Stream 2 in light of the current development in the situation between Russia and Ukraine. IHF Marketing, together with its media and marketing partners, Info and DAZN Group, will adapt the advertising setup in the IHF Champions League men accordingly, and until further notice will inform all participating clubs. So in essence, the advertising has been removed, but my understanding is that the full sponsorship has not been cancelled, as we have seen done in the in the Football Champions League with Gazprom. So that was the first announcement that came out. And then on the 25th of February, the first guidance from the IOC came out to just postpone as many games as possible and put them on neutral ground. So Ukrainian games would be played, so Motor Zaporozhye being the team affected, on neutral ground in the future. And then the IOC came out with another statement on the 28th saying that all Russian and Belarusian athletes should be removed from competition, which then led to the statement from the IHF that you read out, Chris. One of the reasonings for this was the fact that Ukrainian teams were basically affected and the conflict, causing disruption to Ukrainian teams. So therefore, that was the reason to exclude the Russian and Belarusian teams out of the competition. Do you think it's the right decision?
Yes, I do, to be short. But I think it's obviously the Russian players and the Russian people that are suffering because of the actions of the elites in Russia. And I think from their perspective, probably a little bit unfair, because obviously they're not doing a lot of the actions and stuff like that, but it's the only way for the world to put pressure on the people in charge in Russia. So it is it's tough on obviously the athletes themselves, but I think it's the only way to do things. It's the only way forward, I think. And I think it's probably the only time I remember in living memory that people were agreeing with the decision that FIFA made. I think I've never been in a comment section of a FIFA post where I saw so many people going, wow, actually, FIFA, give credit where credit's due. You did something right for once, because them giving up that Gazprom sponsorship, I think it's worth 34 million
UEFA
a year.
there. Sorry.
Or say UEFA, sorry. Yeah. Giving up the 34 million sponsorship is obviously a huge step for them. And it's obviously maybe a bit of a different situation in handball, with it being a smaller sport. Finding a big sponsor like that isn't as easy. So in football, you can walk away from a big sponsor, you'll have another big sponsor knocking on the door, whereas they maybe don't have that luxury in handball. That's maybe why we see this kind of hesitancy from handball to completely cut ties with such big sponsors.
It's not just on the men's side as well. Dalo is the title sponsor of the women's competition. That is a Russian logistics company as well, and run by somebody, Sergei Shishkarev, who has a strong and close connection to handball. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that goes as well. With FIFA, now they tried to go to this kind of halfway house, FIFA, with the World Cup qualifiers, saying it'll be like the Russian national team, not Russia, and trying to have the games on neutral ground. And then there was a huge act of solidarity from a number of nations saying basically that's not going to happen, and that kind of forced their hand a little bit to change the decision to a full suspension of all the teams. I think there was no other decision that could be made, really. It's terrible for the athletes, but it's also terrible for the normal Ukrainian people who have been impacted like that. I mean, I've seen a lot of cases of whataboutery in this as well, and asking, why weren't these decisions made before? Why isn't it done against Israel? Why wasn't it done against the UK and the USA when they invaded Iraq? That kind of stuff like that. And although these, let's say, lack of precedence doesn't explain what is happening here or inform what's happening here, this decision now actually does become a precedent for any future things as well, which I think is really interesting. If and when there are future conflicts, here is a decision that was made now against Russia and Belarus that will probably have to be made against every nation in sport.
Yeah, it is interesting, I suppose, on the kind of sticking with the football side, that politics has become a bigger and bigger part of the sport. For many years, UEFA and FIFA have said that, no politics allowed in football, to an extent where, taking the knee was seen as politics. And now we're seeing a very strong political stance from that nation. So it does set a precedence. I do think it is interesting that on the handball side, and of course it's a smaller sport, it's a much bigger impact, but it can be taken as a bit of hypocrisy where you're punishing the Russian and Belarusian teams while not removing the sponsorship. Removing the sponsor banners is fine to see what happens, but yeah, I think a lot of people may have been disappointed by that decision to not cut ties with that sponsor, with both sponsors, especially when a strong stance is taken on the players. And maybe that will still come, because the Nord Stream decision was the first one that was made quite early in the conflict. And the guidance at the time was to basically postpone and see how it comes out. Now that there's a much stronger guidance for the IIC and the general, let's say, world against Russia and Belarus, the IHF may need to reconsider those ties with those sponsors. But definitely a very difficult position for everyone.
Yeah, I think no matter what happens, I think it's probably going to a certain extent, change the handball landscape in some way. I mean, not looking at the actual situation right now, but you'd imagine in the future with other deals going to come up that people might be somewhat more hesitant to go all in on Russian investment, whatever it may be. So it's I think no matter what happens, it's going to have a huge effect on sponsorship deals of the future as well.
It will have a big effect on the clubs as well. So the teams that are, let's say, most affected in the European competitions are Meshkov Brest will be removed from the competition. Tchaikovsky Medvedi will be removed from the European League. And on the women's side, there's Rostov-Don and CSK, who both are, big contenders for a championship. I suppose it's with Meshkov Brest, we're not seeing a dynamic shift in the competition too much, and they've been poor anyway. I think the biggest impact is, whether we will see Meshkov Brest recovering from this. They've already been in significant scandals. The club is undergoing a rotation, or at least a change in personnel, a change in coaches. And on the basis of the decision, a lot of the players have left. So Meshkov Brest came out with a statement that said that a number of players who were going to move on at the end of the season have left the country. So Jaka Malus, who is going to be moving to Göppingen, I believe, left the club and the country. And Pavel Pachkovsky and Baptiste Bonfond have left the country, even though they're still active players, as well as the coaching duo of Daniel Gordo and Nanu Farelu. So they have not cut ties with the club, so they're still contracted and active participants in the club, but they have moved away from the country under advice from their embassies. Depending on how long this goes on for, we could see basically the collapse of a Champions League club. There's kind of no two ways about it for Meshkov Brest.
Yeah, and interesting now that the women's teams are on a national team break at the moment. So there's Euro qualifiers coming up this week, and also some friendly matches. Whether the players at CSK and even more in Rostov-Don will even return, or whether they will sit out the rest of the season. I mean, that's an interesting one and a difficult decision for the players to have to make as well, what they're going to do, because I imagine also it's not a very not an ideal place to be in Russia right now as well, also considering the crippling economic sanctions that were made against Russia, making life very difficult for people living there as well. So a lot of I think short and long-term effects, and I'm sure the news will change a lot over the coming days and weeks as well. But it has a huge impact, particularly on the women's competition now, because there's a bit of a break now until the playoffs. But so we have to see exactly how it will play out there. There's two ways people were looking at how the suspension of the teams would go, whether there's teams will be knocked out and teams just go one place higher, or whether all the results are annulled. But you actually looked into it, Alex, and found that it makes no real difference.
Yeah, on the women's side, since the group stages are complete, annulling the results leaves us in the exact same situation as we saw with the teams competing. So no team actually changes place in either Group A or Group B. So in essence, they don't really have to make any decisions on the women's side. You can just annul the results or just keep it as it is. The team in seventh being bumped up into the playoff position. On the men's side, though, with Meshkov Brest, there is a bit of difference in how this could be approached. So if the games are annulled, which was the route that EuroLeague basketball took with their Russian teams, they annulled the games. And if that happens, there's a bit of movement. In essence, Montpellier actually are the team that suffers, and they drop down a little bit. So basically, the Aalborg also dropped down a bit. The other way to go with it is to award 10-0 wins for the remaining 2 games, which, there's only 2 games left. That might seem like an easy way forward, but then one of those games is against Vardar. And right now there is a 3-way battle between Vardar, Elverum and Zagreb for the 2 remaining spots in the playoffs. And a win for Vardar, a 10-0 win, would pretty much clinch their place in the playoffs. So I can see that also being contested. So yeah, what would you do?
Tough. I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. I'm going to be honest. Really hard to know. Do you have an opinion there, Brian?
I mean, my gut reaction was like a 10-0 win, but they are quite crucial games at the same time.
The thing I was wondering is if, it's not Meshkov Brest's fault that they're in this position. It's not like they were, the whole team was caught doping and then all of the games before that are no longer valid. So maybe they are just, the remaining 2 games because of these sanctions are made 10-0, which then might be seen as a bit unfair to Elverum and to Zagreb. But yeah, no, the thing is, nothing really is fair in this whole thing. The situation is, I can't imagine there's a solution that really makes everyone happy, particularly when you look over in Group B then and see and wonder whether Motor Zaporozhye will even have an opportunity to continue, or even if do they even want to? What's the situation there, which is really hard to know.
Yeah, that's also something that I suppose we haven't thought about. That we're talking about people who are deeply affected. The Motor players are deeply affected by what is going on, and I don't think it is fair to expect them to play any games. But then they're being punished for this, and it's kind of a crazy situation for those players. And that there was also the story of Carlos Molina, the Motor player. I don't know if you saw that. He is a Spanish player playing in Ukraine for Motor, and he was actually updating. Basically, they were traveling back from a Champions League game, and that is when the conflict started. So he was basically, his flight had to land in Kiev, and then they had to take a bus to Motor Zaporozhye, Zaporozhye, which is the city. All the while not knowing what was going on. So their flight got redirected, airspace was blocked, and he basically just 2 days ago got out of the country with the help of Berta Servas and Kielce. So he traveled 800 kilometers to Poland, to Kielce, which took 4 days by car, including 2 days stuck in traffic at the Polish-Ukrainian border. And actually today, on the 1st of March, he arrived in Kielce to basically seek refuge and, I presume, return back to his home country. So, these are the situations that this club is facing. For players that are not Ukrainian, it's even more intense for the Ukrainian players. I can't imagine Motor playing any more games in the Champions League this season.
Yeah, it's also, it's still 4 years away now, but you have to think that in 2026 we're meant to have a Women's European Championship in Russia, and I don't know how long this obviously is going to drag on for. Maybe it's too far away to think about that kind of stuff, but I don't know. It's even hard to imagine that, to be honest, at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Let's try and cheer ourselves up a bit, will we?
I think a good way to cheer ourselves up is to look at the nominations for the IHF World Player of the Year 2021.
Sorry, lads, we already decided it.
Maybe Chris, you can give the the
list. Yeah, sure. So they announced it. Was it yesterday, or the day before? And we have Denmark's Nicholas Landin. We have Spain's Alex Dushabayev. We have Denmark's Matthias Giesel. We have France's Ludovic Fabregas. And we have Sweden's Jim Gottfridsson. Matthias Giesel it is. We already decided it. We had this conversation right before the Euro. So I don't know. I mean, there's no point in discussing it any further. We had a whole podcast on it.
We did. But their timing, though, is really impeccable, though. You have to say that, just a world war breaks out, but a war breaks out, and then they go, no, we'll just make the announcements now for the World Player of the Year for last year. Yeah. Right now, it's like they almost didn't want anyone to see it. They're just like, okay, now no one's looking.
Here's a question for you. Among the five, Landin, Dushabayev, Giesel, Fabregas, Gottfridsson, we had other players in our final group there, like Dika Mem was there, Gerard was there. Are there any of those five who you think, on reflection, and again, we can't think about last month's Euro because that was a new year, that on reflection, that don't belong in those five?
Well, I suppose you said it, that our three finalists were Dika Mem, Perez de Vargas, and Matthias Giesel. And Dika Mem and Perez de Vargas are missing from the list. So basically, it's very clear for us. I don't know, Fabregas, I don't know. I think he has not actually been at the highest level for a little while now. I don't think he doesn't get ahead of Dika Mem for me. Yeah, even Alex Dushabayev, while he's an incredible player, he's done incredible things. I think Perez de Vargas gets ahead of him as a Spanish representative there.
Yeah.
And Jim Gottfridsson is going to win it anyway because everyone remembers the last tournament.
And that's the problem with doing the vote so late. Everyone's thinking of the wrong stuff. But I feel like, when you go into Google and you put in handball and then you get a few pictures of players that come up at the very top, I think they go on every year and they go handball in this year and they get 5 or 6 pictures that come up and go, they're the nominations. Clearly Google has voted for it and that's what we're going to go with. Bertrand Gilles
actually votes for this. Who makes the decision?
The final decision?
Yeah.
I think it's fans. Voting opens on March 7th.
So it's a fan-only vote.
I don't know. I'm not gonna. I'll have a look in the meantime. And they've also introduced the women's one, so they've beaten us to that. I mean, for about 3 weeks, we'll give you an insight into the inner workings of the podcast, as we've all had busy lives in February, but we have been hoping to do the women's World Handball Player of the Year. Let's have a look at the women's one is Kari Bratseth from Norway and Gjør, Paulette Foppa from France and Brest, Stina Oftedal, Norway and Gjør, Sandra Toft, Denmark and Brest, and Grace Zadi, France and Rostov.
It's a better list, I think.
With the women's side and the short attention span of the IHF, they literally have the last tournament is actually within the calendar year they're talking about, so they have a distinct advantage.
Rounding of the year.
Yeah. So, voting details, right? And this gives you a bit of an insight. So the IHF World Handball Player of the Year awards are now back in full swing after the 2020 edition had been cancelled due to handball being ground to a halt throughout the year by the COVID-19 pandemic. False. There was quite literally 2 European championships and the men's Champions League title was decided then.
That's the equivalent of going. That's the equivalent of going, my dog ate my homework, pretty much.
Yeah, the audacity to try and say that's why it was cancelled. This year, the fan voting for the IHF World Handball Player of the Year will run from Monday, 7th of March, until midnight on the 28th of March. The IHF will announce the winner on the 28th of March.
Jim Gottfridsson Player of the Year 2021 for his amazing performance in the IHF Championship in 2022.
100%.
As for the women's one, well, hopefully by the next podcast we'll decide that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
One thing though that did come out that sheds a different light on one of the players that was nominated for the women's side, Sandra Toft, who is moving to Dior next year.
Yeah.
For so many years, she was the shining light of the anti-Dior brigade.
She literally said it
to us, where she said she doesn't want to win the Champions League. She wants to win the Champions League. She doesn't want to win it with Dior because it'll be much better. And she's decided to move. So,
she could still win it with Brest this season. There's still a chance, but yeah, she's finally given in and moving to Dior. I mean, look, it's only so if you can't beat him, join him, as they say, and you can't blame her for making the move eventually. So yeah.
Other transfer news: we had Bjarki Ellison moving to Veszprem, which was predicted by you, Chris.
Yeah, what I say, I don't want to take too much credit. I kind of linked him with every single Champions League club in Europe. I knew he was going to the Champions League. I was like, "But which team?" But in the end, is when Veszprem did kind of. It is a good move. It's the kind of player that Veszprem usually get in the wing, and we did joke about him, like better get used to not getting the ball and all that, but. Veszprem's top scorer this season has been Gasper Margic on the right wing, and Manu Sterlek is pretty high. Manu Sterlek's not been doing so badly in the left wing as well. Yeah, I mean they do like fast breaks though. I don't know. I think he'll do fantastically well, and he's been very, very good this season. He seems to be hitting his peak as a player. So.
And we know that Maniskov is the one leaving, don't we?
Yeah, exactly.
But we don't know where he's going to yet.
No, he's got a knee injury at the moment as well, so I don't know what the plan for him is.
Other big news is Christian Berge moving on from Norway and of making his move to Karlstad official. Rumored for a long time that he would go to the big Karlstad project. Obviously, he's been talking to the Karlstad staff and players for a little while before making this decision if he's ready to take over immediately. He was given the ultimatum by the Norwegian Handball Federation saying that, you can't do both. One or the other, decide as soon as possible. And after their... I don't know what to call their performance in the last European Championship, because Norway were seconds away from, who knows, winning the whole thing. They had the chance to do that after a disappointing start, but we did say it felt like an end of an era, and I think it's probably good for that Norwegian team to move on and see who they can get. It'll be difficult to replace or replicate what Christian Berge has done with the team, but maybe they can get someone in to really bring this generation to the next level, involve the players on the outskirts, and rebuild the team into a medal-winning team.
If you were in charge now, who would you, off the top of your head, pick who I think is perfect for that Norway job?
The current Norwegian European champion, Glenn Solberg. But I don't think they're gonna snap him away from Sweden very easily. Yeah, honestly, this is the first time I've really thought about it. I reckon Mikael Appelgren is a good one there. He was the Elverum coach. He's currently with Sävehof, and Sävehof's been amazing in the European League this year. They've really been like the surprise package of the competition. And he is a Swede, but he knows the Norwegians very well. Borgelund, I mean, he just left as assistant coach of Norway so I guess he got also an ultimatum from them saying you can't do both, so he decided for Elverum, so probably not. Maybe Magnus Andersson could be an option. I mean, the Porto coach, he's very good as well. Swede, though, I think there's a lot of people.
Swede, though,
yeah. That's a
very, very good.
Glenn Solberg is actually Norwegian, but he belongs to the Swedes. I reckon there's a lot of people who would have their eye on that job.
Would you ever go for something like left field from Bjarte Myrhol if you ever wanted to legend of the Norwegian team? But
I was just thinking that, Norway doesn't really have these former legends who have turned to coaches and are now kind of leading the way, since the Norwegian I'd say success is so new relatively in the history of handball. They don't have another generation of guys from 20 years ago which are now experts.
Well, there is Christian Schelling, who we did have on the podcast during the previous Men's Euro 2020. He's Drammen coach at the moment, and he is a bit of a legend, so he could be a shot as well. There'd be hiring from within, but not much international coaching experience.
Do you ever think there'd be some sensational scoop that they get Herger Iversen over from the women's team and just have him swap over? You never see it though.
Champions League winner Ole Ekstad. I think he's done some men's coaching before, but yeah, hard to see him leave Vipers. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Honestly, if you asked what I would do if I was in charge, I would have let Christian Berger take both jobs for a while and see how it worked out, because then he'd quite literally be coaching half of the national team day in, day out.
I think, yeah, it is strange, isn't it, that they have this setup. Maybe Norway just didn't want it. The Norwegian Federation didn't want this dependency on one club and one way of working. But there's got to be a clash of, no, it's a really tough job for any coach that comes in. So coach comes in, all the players are used to playing one style, which is Christian Berger's style, for the last 8 years that he's been there. Then on top of that, he also has players currently playing the Christian Berger style of handball at their clubs, and including pretty much all the top players. So it's a tough ask.
If only they had Christian Berger and Borgelund coaching the team together. Oh wait, they did last year.
Yeah, it is really unusual when you think about it. I mean, Norway were on the fringes of kind of obscurity on the national team front, on the men's side anyway, for a long time, and he takes them from that to basically stardom, and then they give him an ultimatum like that. You think almost it was someone who did that. You think you almost would have a clean slate. He's like Marcelo Bielsa of the handball world. Leeds United kicking him out the door after he took him from the doldrums of the championship.
Oh, that hurts, does it, Brian? That hurts.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, it is actually a good decision to move on from Christian Berger. We've talked about how stale they've become, a little bit stale they've become, and getting someone else in can bring in top players that they have coming up through the teams, like Tobias Grandal, to integrate them into a leading player in this team.
Yeah. Other national team news. Everyone's favourite freelance handball coach, Per Johannesson, has taken over the Netherlands, which I think is a nice gig for him. We'll see if he can still be Rostov Don coach in a while, whether that's happening or not. But in the meantime, he's got the Dutch women. It's a pity that Monique Teisterman didn't stay on. She just wanted to kind of fill the gap for a little bit. But yeah, Per Johannesson, I guess he stayed too long with Rostov and needed something else to shake things up a little bit. Too long in one place. Yeah,
he definitely doesn't like staying around too long in one place. But it's an interesting one personality-wise, because I think it's quite different to what they've had before. So he seems to have gone to a lot more of the Slavic side of things for quite a while. So it's going to be interesting to see how he gets on with the Dutch girls. He's not going to send them on the bus home. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Do you remember that quote?
That could be a clash of personalities there. We'll find out. Or before we go, there was some handball being played as well in the last few weeks, and Brian and I went to a couple of games together. Most recently, Barca against Veszprém, which was a real clash of two halves, to use the well trodden phrase. But really nice to be in Barcelona first of all, and to be there for a game like that with a good crowd as well, wasn't it, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I've been going to games on this side of Europe for quite some time. So going to Hungary a lot, or certain parts of Germany. And it was a great treat to finally go over to the other side of Europe for a game. It's a completely different experience. And I think the last time I was in Camp Nou, I think we were there with the Irish team.
Yeah.
And
we were
training.
We were playing.
Playing there, yeah. So that's a long time ago. And so I have always good memories of going to Barcelona for anything handball related. So it was great to be there. And also I think we saw some sparks of maybe what might come from this Barcelona setup. I think they've, especially in attack, obviously been struggling quite a lot. But I think in the second half they kind of showed some elements, not as the free-flowing Barcelona of the past, but they did the job on Veszprém, and I think Veszprém kind of just it felt like they had nobody to turn to in the second half to kind of get them out of that hole that they were stuck in. I don't know what it seemed like to you, Chris.
Yeah, it was funny talking to the players just after the game, and also hearing some Veszprém quotes this week. They were very happy with how the first half went, and they kind of just wrote off the second half as like, okay, that was an away loss. But Barca in attack in that second half were as good as I've seen them since last season, basically. And Gonzalo Perez de Vargas was looking at it from his own goal, and what he said was, the systems that Antonio Carlos Ortega have implemented are very advanced and take time to really get into place. And he said in defense we're still getting there, but I think today we saw an attack, everything click. So that is quite exciting that they've just at the second half of the season they're only really starting to find their way.
I mean, for players like that to say these are very advanced systems as well, it's quite terrifying. Yeah. Also.
Right.
Can't even comprehend what that could be. But yeah, Barca haven't been too impressive, but they've been getting the wins that they needed to. They have Sindrich coming back from injury, which is very important for their attack. I think they've struggled a lot without him in there. They have lost Blas Jans for a little bit with an injury, but I don't think he's been as crucial of a player for them this season, especially with Alex Gomez there on the right wing lighting it up. Yeah, overall, does it seem like there is no team that's actually impressing at the moment in the Champions League? So every team seems to have a bit of issues.
I mean, I think that's understandable, though, isn't it? After the Euro as well. Also, when you think of like Aalborg being the top dog in one group, and they're like on a 5-game winning streak, but they had so many players play so deep in the Euro. Barca, Kielce, and Aalborg have kind of stood out for me since the turn of the year in a good way. And in the Champions League, though, they've only played 2 rounds, but for me, those 3, Kielce, Aalborg, and Barca, have been pretty good. But yeah, nobody's beating anyone by 15 goals, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, it's more looking at the whole competition, and basically, usually what we talk about is, there's these 3 or 4 dominant teams who we see going through.
That's what you want, isn't it?
It is, but I don't know. There is competition throughout. There's a lot of, all the spaces in the playoffs are open, as in every team that's still involved in the competition can still make the playoffs. That's fantastic. All the games are tight, unpredictable, but there seems to be an element of, doesn't feel like there's any teams that are really, really good at the moment. Or is there one, Brian?
No, I had the exact same feeling. Even at the last 2 games I was at, I was looking at Flensburg. I was like, okay, they're way off the pace at the moment. And I thought, Kielce probably did enough there. And then I went to the Barcelona Veszprém game. I go, it was good, but they're probably still off the Final Four pace. And then I thought, wait a second, who am I comparing them to? I'm comparing them to almost memories of teams I've remembered from past seasons who were really like crushing it. So I do think probably the overall level does seem a little bit lower, where that could be obviously a lot of reasons. That I think it's a lot of chopping and changing in different teams, and every time you turn around, West Brom has a new coach, so it's hard for them to always keep readjusting.
Well, just on that, David Davies being back in Varda, holy moly! What a difference he made. Speaking of West Brom coaches, fair play to David for rejuvenating that Vardar team.
Some people just belong in certain places, and you feel like his place is Vardar. So I hope he can keep on trucking there, because that's if to do anything at all, it's going to be an incredible story. Like,
yeah. But imagine being those Vardar players and having Vujovic as your coach for a year, or like half a year that he's been in. One of the meanest guys at handball, and then David Davies comes in and he's just the nice guy. It must be pretty easy to get that new coach boost going from Vujovic to David Davies. But let's see if
Davies blows the cobwebs off the remote control on the TV. It was like, look, that's time to do some video. Sit down, boys. Remember this?
On the music in the dressing room, a bit of reggaeton comes on, the players start vibing. That's we're in a new age.
All right, well, I think we managed to sufficiently bring up the mood over the course of the podcast. Then I think it's a good as time as any to leave it, and we'll be back for the next podcast. We promise to do the Women's Handball Player of the Year for 2021.